Daniella Toosie-Watson is a poet, visual artist, and educator, shortlisted for the 2024 Oxford Poetry Prize and has been published in The Atlantic, The Paris Review, Oxford Poetry, Callaloo, Virginia Quarterly Review, Poet Lore, and elsewhere. They received their MFA from the University of Michigan Helen Zell Writers Program. Their first book, What We Do with God, is coming out this week from Haymarket Books. Okay, tell me about your grad school experience and how you came to write What We Do with God.
Oh yeah, What We Do with God is a book in the world, isn't it? Grad school was very hard, didn't love, not going to lie to you. Did I learn a lot of things? Yes, I did. And did it help me write this book? Yes, it did. And for that, I'm really grateful. It was a chance to study alongside really brilliant writers and colleagues and learn from really brilliant mentors. This book started as my thesis in grad school. It was originally called Jesucristo. I'm like, do I give the translation first or the backstory first? Okay, I'm gonna give the backstory. The title poem of the book, Jesucristo, was I, I feel like the foundation, as I'm talking right now, I'm realizing was really the foundation of this book thematically. And if we want to give context, which I do, my mom or my grandma or maybe my aunt, whenever they would get frustrated around the house, they would say, Ah, Jesucristo, Cristo. Yeah, and which means, Oh, Jesus Christ. And when I first started hearing this, I was very young and didn't know a lot of Spanish because they were speaking it around the house, not really teaching me though. So I picked up words here and there, but I was like, Jesu frito, I don't know what that is because I heard Jesu frito, which translates to fried Jesus. And so one time I go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, what does Jesu frito mean? And she was like, What did you just say to me? And I was like, when you get mad, you're like, Jesu frito. She was like, That's not what that means. And she explained what Jesucristo means, and she laughed. And it was a very jarring moment for all of us. But immediately after laughing with her, I was like, why am I laughing? This is terrible. Jesus, I'm so sorry. And so that was the title of that poem. And it really touched on the themes that are present in the book now, thinking about sort of the violence that the speaker has faced, thinking about that violence in relationship to religion, the speaker's relationship to the figure of God as like divine and human, all of those things. And then I just was like, no, that's not the title anymore. It wasn't as centralized to the book as I thought. And throughout the whole writing process, there have been so many moments of, oh, this is not as central as I thought. And that's really jarring and a joy throughout the whole book process. There's so much that goes into this whole process. So if at any point you're like, okay, Daniela, we got it, just tell me. But that's part of the joy and a part of the jarringness of writing a book is that you're learning as you go. And you're like, oh no, this was almost in the world. I'm so glad that somebody maybe more studied, maybe smarter, maybe, with a different eye lens than me saw this before it went out into the world, which is really just that fear of when is the poem done? When is the book done? Emerging in that way. I'm really grateful for all the different eyes that have been on this manuscript throughout the years, which is in part a part of grad school, getting different eyes on the book. And I'll end there, but before I end, I'll say that getting eyes on your manuscript in a grad school setting teaches you how to weed out who can and can't have eyes on your book. Specifically speaking to a workshop experience, I was talking to somebody about this recently who was asking me about my grad school experience as they're applying to the same MFA, where most of the workshop really for me is not, yay, there are people who are going to tell me how to write my work or what's this or what's that. It's not, it's more so about learning who can't have eyes on your work. And having that discerning eye and ear as to, okay, this person is going to give me feedback according to like their aesthetic, their idea of what a poem is or isn't, bringing all of their history with poetry and other things, because there are so many other things besides poetry that go into critique, you know? And so also, oh, this person has a really good eye for my work in particular. You know, they get what I'm doing, they see my vision, and they are going to give me critique in collaboration and not give critique like at me, you know. And that's another big part of a book with choosing a press, with choosing who is going to see the vision that I have for it, and not just my vision, but like seeing what it can be beyond what I can see right now. So yes,
That's great. Do you know Mary Spooner by any chance?
yes, I do. Oh my God, do you know Mary Spooner?
Yes, from like my college days. She and I were both at USM for a while. Because I did my undergrad there, and she also did her undergrad, and then I think she did her master's before she got an MFA. And I think she got an MFA in your program. So I love her. She's amazing. She is one of the most talented writers I know. So very cool that you have had like workshop with her.
You know, I tell you what, the world is so small, the writing world is even smaller. And also, I love friendship. It's my favorite thing. So when there's like friendship crossover, it's a great genre of crossover for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The quotes you chose for the epigraph are so perfect and fitting. And I love the opening poem in particular, The Bug. And I felt like that also serves as a sort of epigraph. Could you talk a bit about the process of selecting those things and maybe at what point in the book's development you made those decisions?
Sure. Oh, I love these epigraphs. I'm so glad. I was like, wow, like I chose some epigraphs. And I'm like, I'm just so glad that they were written. Okay, the first epigraph is from Carl Phillips' poem Custom from his collection The Rest of Love. It says, "You shouldn't look at me like that, like one of those saints on whom the birds once settled freely." Oh, God, I love that so much. And that is the last line of Custom, by the way. Ending a poem like that, okay, let me move on. The second epigraph is from Zora Neale Hurston, and it says, "It was grotesque, yes, but it indicated the desire for beauty." So I read that when I was reading The Black Interior by Elizabeth Alexander, and she cites this section of Zora Neale Hurston that was talking about the interior of this woman's space and this sort of like maximalist's experience of it. And in that, that's what, you know, she was referring to when she says it was grotesque. Yes, but it indicated the desire for beauty. And I read that and I wanted to like toss the book and call it a day because it was just so brilliant and beautiful. When I read something like that, I often think whenever I read anything, how does this apply to other things? How can I map this onto another thing? But that can be a slippery slope because you have to be responsible about how you map one thing onto another, like taking it out of context, right? When I think about it was grotesque, yes, but it indicated the desire for beauty, I think about all the ways that I've tried to curate beauty in my life and what I've considered beautiful or not beautiful changes over time, especially in a book like this, where I think about relationships, not just romantic relationships, but otherwise, and what constitutes beauty in romance or in friendship or in a divine relationship. Beauty, not just aesthetically, but beauty as something that Beauty can be so many things. Beauty can be like passageways, you know, beauty, passageway to the divine, like aesthetic, aesthetically beautiful. Who's to say? You know, different people have different pathways to the divine, and it's not always beautiful aesthetically, but it's beauty in a sense. But also, how do you define beauty? Does it have to feel good? Not necessarily, but for some it does, you know? And so when I think it, you know, it was grotesque, yes, but it indicated the desire for beauty. That's an aim, the direction. This book, What We Do with God, is so much about trying to, having to recalibrate the direction, trying to recalibrate the direction, you know, towards beauty, towards a kind of autonomy. A lot of it is grotesque. Maybe not for everybody, but for the speaker, for sure. Sometimes in that curation, you really mess things up, but you also get it right sometimes. I think a folly of the speaker is that they'll say, "Oh, I got it right this time," and think that they've arrived in the land of beauty, and then something goes awry, and it's like, "Oh no, what have I done?" It's a lot of learning and unlearning and learning and unlearning. And so when I'm picking the epigraphs, to bring it back to that, you know, I feel like I picked the epigraphs in a similar way to which I pick titles of books. And not just of books, but of poems, because sometimes the title is a touchstone. It gives a sense of direction. Like you write the title first, and then, okay, I want to write a poem. That's this title. And then you go back to it when you're losing the thread. And then you sort of gets you back on track. My cat is chasing its tail, and it's quite delightful. And then there are poems that a title would be a bit like restrictive. You need more space to play outside of that. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes with a title, it's a touchstone and you give room to shift as the poem shifts. You're like, this is not in line with what I was originally writing according to this title. However, this needs to go in this direction. But the poem is calling for that. And so similarly with the epigraphs, as soon as I read that poem, that part just kind of clung. I don't know if you've ever been to Playland in Rye in New York. They had this probably real dangerous ride where it spins really fast and you get stuck to the wall and you can't move. And it's one of those, but like the ride was my heart. And the epigraph was just like so so niche reference. It's fine, but yeah, I read that and that just really stuck with me. You shouldn't look at me like that, like one of those saints on whom the birds once settled freely, because, you know, the speaker of this book is religious, femme. And for the sort of speaker's subject position and their context and the way that they move through the world, like, no, bitch, don't look at me like a saint. That is not me. Maybe the birds once settled freely, but not anymore. And then I was like, oh, this is what my book is about. No, that has to be there. So, yes.
You bring in a fascinating array of cultural touchstones, literary figures, and media. Bell hooks, the movie Midsummer, the Apostle Paul. How do you go about selecting them, and how have they impacted your writing? I also kind of want to know how bell hooks would feel about the movie Midsummer.
I also want to know. I'm wondering now if there is the system I have for choosing things. It feels like the different mediums I've consumed kind of go into this constellation in my brain and interact with each other. How I select them feels similar to the process of how I teach in the classroom, which is, you know, I have these students who have all of these different ideas. They're bringing to the material that I'm presenting them different contexts, you know, different things that they've consumed, and they're trying to make a connection. They're trying to make a leap between what they know and what I'm giving them, which they may not know. And even though they may not know the material, they have reference points. and they can say, "Oh, I don't know this theory, but that's familiar to me." And then we work through it in collaboration together according to what I know and what they know. And then we come to something new. And it feels like that's how I select the different references in my book, whether it be Apostle Paul or Bell Hooks or Midsommar, that movie. And I'm drawing connections. Like maybe this isn't a direct correlation as we think about a direct correlation, but if these aren't related, I don't know what is. And so it's a matter of making relationships. It's having those different things I know be in conversation with each other and see what comes from that conversation. I think that's mostly how I go about that selection is like, what do I know? And how does what I know talk to each other?
That's fascinating. I want to try that with my students.
Also, I feel like I did a really good job keeping it short that time. I did much better. Okay.
You did. You did great. I hesitate to think that the narrator of these poems is entirely irreverent. Could you speak a bit about how you balance reverence and irreverence in your writing?
I just love that you asked that question because, yes, that is like, okay. Callaloo, 2015. I was a 2015 and 2016 Callaloo Creative Writing Workshop Fellow. And one of my mentors was Vivi Francis. That was my first introduction into the literary community, my first introduction to really just like poetry and all that stuff. Every poem that I'd written up until Callaloo was written in praise of God. I was very much entrenched in the church and had a lot of fear around writing anything that didn't praise God. Most of my performances were at church, and if it wasn't at church, the crowd was for sure from the church at whatever venue it was. I went to Callaloo, and the first thing that Vivi says on the first day is that we're not obligated to write into a collective narrative. She told us that we're allowed to write our personal stories. And I saw other people in my workshop writing what was so urgent to their hearts and lives. You don't always know that you need permission for something until you get it. And so it gave me permission to talk about hard things that I didn't know I could talk about. And especially in poetry, if it's gonna, other people are gonna see it. And so I told Ravi about my trepidation about writing anything that didn't praise God. I did have my qualms, to say the least, but I was afraid. And I said this to Vivi, and she says to me, "Oh, I'm gonna cry." Isn't it part of the grace of God, the ability to wrestle with God? That changed my life. And that was the door to me writing what I write now, the door to this book being in the world. This book isn't irreverent as well. People will say it's irreverent, and that's fine because that's not my business. As for me and my book and my household, this book is my wrestling. The speaker is wrestling. And if the speaker didn't wrestle with God, I would question if she loved God at all or trusted God at all. Because you don't wrestle with someone you don't trust, you know? So yeah, that's that.
I love that. I also really love the lines, "I'm waiting to write the wreck, as it were, not about the wreck, how to render it, the unspeakable thing, not make meaning of it. The meaning of it is the life I'm living." And how they so perfectly seem to encapsulate your writing process. Can we talk a bit more about those lines and how they relate to your process?
Oh, I love that question. And that poem, by the way, just came out in the world with Blue Press, The Obsession to Be Good. I'm so excited that it's in the world now.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm waiting to write the rec, as it were, not about the rec. That's a reference to Adrienne Rich. In the final version, like the note at the footnote, this is Adrienne Rich reference, you know? So when I read Adrienne Rich and this idea of like writing the rec or diving into the rec, I have a dear friend there, still my friend. Jason B. Smith, I love you. I remember asking them to look at one of my poems, and something they said to me was, this was years ago, was that, I'm writing around something really urgent, and it's knocking, it's saying, hello, I'm here. It's not pressing the thing. I'm writing around the thing, but I'm not touching it. And so that moment was, how do I write the rec? Ever since I heard that advice from Jason and read Adrienne Rich, I was like, how does one render the rec as it is? When it says, I'm waiting to write the rec as it were not about the rec, how to render it, you know what I mean? The unspeakable thing. How do you write the unspeakable thing with like language is so inadequate at times for what it is, especially I'm writing in the English language. There's so much that it just does not access, you know. Um, and so not make meaning of it. The meaning of it is the life I'm living, like the life you're living, that is what I'm trying to write about. What the speaker is trying to say, like I can only give approximations to the life I'm living. I can give you an approximation of what I'm feeling in my body. But how do I put the feeling and say, this is it? When it's a thing that just takes different shapes on different days and has so many things that it is and isn't, When I think about that in terms of a writing process, I mean, that's it. Does that answer your question?
It's good enough.
Thank
I think it does.
you.
What are your best strategies for revision?
My best strategies for revision. What are my best strategies for revision? When I'm thinking about revision and I'm approaching a poem that I feel is done, or as far as I can take it, I think one thing that really helped me that I learned in grad school was learning, okay, well, why is it there in the first place? If it's there, if there's an impulse for it to be there, then there's a reason that it's there. I remember one time I was in workshop and the professor was like, well, I said, that line isn't working in somebody's poem, like I was just cutting it. And whoo, teacher did not like that. And they're like, hold on, before you go and cut out a whole line, why is it there? You have to examine that first. Because if it's there, there's a reason for it to be there. There was an impulse. See why it was put there in the first place. Then if it's not working, sure. But we haven't even gotten to those steps of seeing, investigating it more. So if I'm looking at a poem that I feel is at its end point of where I can take it at that moment, I comb through it and I say, can this be unpacked? Does it need to be? Okay, this doesn't seem like it fits, but I put it there for a reason. Why is it there? I ask questions of it. Like I would sort of like ask maybe a friend, ask questions of the poem. That's revision number one. Two, if I have come to that point and maybe I've done the unpacking that I can do, I take a step back. I leave it alone for a few days, let it breathe, and I let my mind kind of get out of that poem mode and explore other things that I think are beautiful or lovely. Watch a movie, watch a show, listen to a song, see what that does for how I approach the poem, see what that does for my lens. And then I come back to the poem. If by then I'm still like, man, I don't know what to do with this poem, maybe I send it to a trusted friend, like a trusted reader. So those are the main three things. Of course, there are other strategies, but I think those are the ones that I focus in on.
What do you most hope people take away from this book?
That they can write their stories. When I was first trying to write poems that didn't praise God, when I was first trying to write about violence and all those other things that were really difficult, there's this poem that's dear to me. Two poems, actually. There's 100 Bells by Tarfia Fajula, and Say It Any Way You Can by V. Francis. The first poem I ever wrote about violence, I remember it very clearly. I wrote at the top of the page, say it any way you can. And then I just said it any way that I could. I wasn't trying to make something pretty. Whatever way it could come out, I put it there. And then I think about 100 Bells and how influential that poem was for me. To find out that Afia Faizullah was able to write 100 Bells because of Faye Francis's Say It Any Way You Can, I was like, is it a lineage emerging? You know? And it was just so beautiful to see the ways that these different writers who have been so not just influential, but essential to my writing life and my life in general, how they gave each other permission and were now giving me permission. When I set out to write, my hope is always, I really hope somebody who doesn't think they can write what's true to them can write it now, seeing that I've done the thing too, that it gives permission and a bit of, a sort of in-spiteness, in their spirit. That's what I hope.
I love that. That's really sweet. Can you give our viewers a writing prompt inspired by what we do with God?
Yes, I can. Okay. What indicates your desire for beauty? Maybe I'm cheating because that's the epigraph and not my words. But it is a part of the book in a way. What indicates your desire for beauty? What is that thing that might be grotesque, but indicates your search for beauty? And what do you do with it? What do you do with that? Because when I think what we do with God, it's like, what do we do with this thing that you can't hold in the palm of your hand, but call it something, give it language? What do you do with that? So whatever it is that, on that search for beauty, what is the indicator that you're searching for it? And what do you do with it when you know what it is? Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this, but I recently announced that we're gonna try to launch a anthology it's like a prize journal. And we hired 2 judges, one for fiction, one for poetry. We're making the people who submit respond to interviews and like prompts that my guests give. And so I'll add you to the list of people that people can respond to. So
I love that. Thank you. That's so
yeah.
cool.
And Hanif Abdurraqib is judging the poetry submission. So
Hanif is an incredible human, and I'm so grateful that his eyes are going to be on the work. He's incredible. He also loved my book.
I know. I was so excited to see that because it was right before I announced.
Listen, Hanif is an incredible person, and as we know, incredible writer. And I met Hanif in Callaloo in 2016, and has just been so supportive of me and my work ever since. And I just eternal gratitude to Hanif. Yeah,
he is so nice.
So nice.
Can you talk a bit about the submission process? And you kind of like touched on this a little bit when you were talking about like the editor process and stuff, but can you just talk about how all of that went down for you?
Yeah, sure. So when my manuscript was, ready to start going out into the world, I posted on like Twitter, Instagram, hey, I have a book that is now ready to be in the world, or, I'm looking for someone to publish my book, please. Where should I submit it? I was looking for places to submit, but I was also kind of fishing, like, hey, I have a book. Wanna ask for it, publishers, please. And they did. Haymarket reached out to me after seeing that post. Erica Foreman reached out to me and was like, hey, I want to send you some books. And I was like, great, please, thanks. Also, but no context, just we want to send you books. So I was like, thank you. And then I got the books and I was like, this is so many books. I love this. Erica, what would you like me to do with them? I was so grateful, and also wasn't sure if there was a follow-up. They wanted to send me books, and then they solicited my manuscript. They were like, okay, it's with the folks now. We're reviewing it. We'll get back to you in the fall. That was in the summer, in the fall, and they accepted it. And here we are today. Yeah, that was that. Sometimes you just got to be like, hey, I'm writing something. And then people will say, oh, I want to see it. And then you rip up. So, yeah.
I'm sure it helps that you've been published by some really big places, right?
It does. It for sure does. Over the years, I've been really intentional about trying to establish my online presence and make sure that I talk about things as they happen and all of that. All of it matters and all of it goes into it. But yeah, that was my process. I'm really grateful for how that went because I had submitted it to other places before. It was solicited by Haymarket and they were like, no thanks. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. Bye. Yeah, my submittable has so many gray buttons on it, but not this one. This one is green, and we love that for me. I love that for me, at least. The royal I love it. So, yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniella. I hope you feel better, and thank you so much for coming on this.
Thank you so much for having me. And also, Faye is honored as well. So, yes.
I love Faye.
I love her so much.
All right. Take care.